Total had announced its intentions 2 months ago. Now, while the company's decision shouldn't come as much of a surprise, how much of a game changer is it in your view?
Well, it actually isn't, because it's already been factored in that the major companies, because of their exposure to the American market, will not be staying in the Iranian market, despite the efforts by the European governments to keep them there. Instead, the focus that the European governments have had in order to save the nuclear deal has been on convincing mid-sized and smaller-sized companies to enter the Iranian market in order to ensure that the Iranians are getting what they were promised to keep the nuclear deal. And that way, only bring in companies that don't have much exposure to the US market. And Total, obviously being a giant, is at greater risk.
But does this, in your view, set any kind of precedent? How many other companies might follow in Total's footsteps?
Well, Total's announcement 2 months ago, as you mentioned, was an important announcement, because at the end of the day, Total has been one of the companies that has been more risk willing when it comes to Iran in particular. Historically, they're the ones who took on the contract that ConocoPhillips, or Conoco at the time, had signed with Iran in 1994, which was then killed by the Clinton administration, and Total took it instead, and then continued to stand against sanctions that the US had imposed on secondary countries. But I think the other thing that is important here is that the French government was very adamant about making sure that the US's extraterritorial sanctions would not be an infringement on French independence. This clearly is not working out that well for the French government, because it has not managed to convince the major French companies to defy these sanctions and stand by the European position.
Now, the process to find a replacement for Total has already begun. Officials in Iran have been suggesting that a Chinese state company could pick up Total's state. But how damaging would it be, in your view, for the US to see its main economic rival, China, pick up the reins here, so to speak?
Yeah, that's part of the problem. If you look at this from an American perspective, and you look at it from a longer-term strategic perspective, this is an extremely ill-advised move by the Trump administration, because the Iranians are going to end up giving those contracts to countries that are willing to defy US extraterritorial sanctions. Those countries, almost by definition, are going to be American rivals. And China, of course, is one of them. And the Chinese are quite I'm not saying they're happy about the way that Trump is handling the Iran case, but they're certainly benefiting from the way that so much of the Iranian economy is now going to fall in Chinese hands.
You mentioned the French government in a previous answer there. How damaging, or how much of a blow is this to Emmanuel Macron and his government?
I'm not sure how big of a blow it will be, in the sense that, again, this was already announced earlier on, but it is a blow to the idea that France will stand up for its own sovereignty and not be bullied by the Trump administration. Because Total was the flag bearer of France's economic involvement in Iran, and they had been there for quite some time before the nuclear deal. They were one of the first ones to re-enter, and already back in 2017, the French government insisted that Total would stay. The Total itself was saying that it was going to stay, and now we're seeing this happening. So I think for the effort of making sure that France's government stands up for French sovereignty here, this clearly is not a positive development.
Okay, Trita Parsi, the founder of the National Iranian American Council, thank you for being with us here on France 24.